Hello and welcome back to St. Thomas Aquinas for everyone. I am Dave Palmer and we are learning about St. Thomas's teaching on can we come to know God. And in the last video, I talked about how Thomas said, through our senses, through our we just are not able to know God because God does not possess matter, and so we can never sense him. We can't see him or touch him or taste him or smell him, right? And so that's the problem that we have. And just as a bit of review, this is us, okay? This is human nature in all its glory, but also in its limitations. And so when we talk about God, now this is a representation of God, but God is not a white-haired old man. This is just how we have to kind of bring God down to our level. But the point is that it's not in our nature, our God-given nature to be able to naturally know God, okay? It's like what I said about the dog learning algebra. It's not in the nature of a dog to be able to understand algebra. Now, a dog could be lifted above its nature and all of a sudden there's a dog that knows algebra. I don't know if that's ever happened before or not, but that's a similarity between us knowing God and the dog knowing algebra, okay? So does that make sense? Now, I want to remind you of an article that we talked about a long time ago, the very, very first article in the Summa, okay? Part 1, Question 1, Article 1. Thomas said it was necessary for man's salvation that there should be a knowledge revealed by God besides philosophical science built up by human reason. Firstly, indeed, because man is directed to God as to an end that surpasses the grasp of his reason. Okay, I'll stop there. This is the whole point of the Summa, is that man is called to an end that surpasses his nature. Man's end is coming to know God. That is beatitude. That's our final end, right? But how in the world are we going to accomplish it? Let's move on. And Thomas says, whether any created intellect, that's you and me, by its natural powers conceive the divine essence. Now, this little paragraph here is going to be kind of complicated, but just remember, we aren't expected to understand this entirely. God is a mystery. God is above us. And so just do your best to try to understand this as best as you can, and it'll make more sense as we go along, okay? Thomas says there is another kind of cognitive power in the soul called the intellect, and this is not the act of any corporeal organ, okay? Our intellect is not connected necessarily to our brain. Our intellect is outside the body, which is kind of interesting to think about. Wherefore, the intellect naturally knows natures which exist only in individual matter. Okay, so here's the problem. God doesn't exist in matter. Remember, that was part of his simplicity, is that he has no matter, he has no form, right? Not as they are in such individual matter, but according as they are abstracted, therefore, by the considering act of the intellect. Hence it follows that through the intellect, we can understand these objects as universal, and this is beyond the power of sense. Okay, is your head spinning? Does it, is your eyes glazed over? Okay, here's the deal. There's a bird. We learned about the bird being, this individual bird is a suppositum, one bird, right? But the essence of that bird is birdness that it shares with all the other birds. Same thing with a lamp, okay? This is man-made, of course, but it's a lamp, okay? But it has a physical quality. The intellect abstracts the essence, the form, okay? The birdness or the lampness, right? Or the mosquito-ness. And the senses see the physical object. Much more about this as we get into human nature, but this is the reason why we can't abstract God, because there's no physical aspect to him. There's no material, there's no matter, right? So here's the thing though. Thomas asks in Article 5 whether the created intellect needs any created light in order to see the essence of God. I will tell you that in this 12th question in Article 5, Thomas foreshadows the end of the Summa. Okay, it's really amazing. Here's what he says. Everything which is raised up to what exceeds its nature must be prepared by some disposition above its nature, but when any created intellect sees the essence of God itself becomes the intelligible form of the intellect. Now that is really heavy, but I would say that that is probably the thesis statement of the entire Summa, okay? This is the end goal, where the, the, the divine essence becomes the intelligible form of our intellect. That is heaven. That's beatitude, okay? Hence it is necessary that some supernatural disposition should be added to the intellect in order that it may be raised up to such a great and sublime height. Now, since the natural power of the created intellect does not avail to enable it to see the essence of God, it is necessary that the power of the understanding should be added by divine grace. Okay? We need help to get to our final end. We have to have supernatural assistance. This increase of the intellectual powers is called the illumination of the intellect. Okay, so I highlighted those two most important parts. In fact, I would say that these are two of the most important parts of the entire Summa. Okay, the essence of God becomes the intelligible form of the intellect. That is heaven. That is a description of heaven. It is the illumination of the intellect, and that's why we can try to know God, but we can't know God unless He helps us. Okay, and that's the whole point of the Summa, is understanding, well, how do we get to heaven? How do we come to know God? How do we rest in God? Well, that's going to be the next, 620 questions of the Summa, and we're going to continue talking about that, all right? I know this was a challenging lesson, all right, but hang in there. It does get easier. The first, 10 or 20 questions of the Summa are in many ways some of the most challenging, but if you're enjoying this, stick with it, and you're going to learn a little bit more every day, okay? We're going to continue on tomorrow with our last lesson about coming to know God, and it's really interesting, so stick with it. I'll see you in the next lesson. This has been St. Thomas Aquinas for everyone, and my name is Dave Palmer. Thanks for watching. God bless you.